This is a story about a man named Harold Crick and his wristwatch. Harold Crick was a man of infinite numbers, endless calculations, and remarkably few words. And his wristwatch said even less.
Okay, retro go. Let's go.
Hello and welcome. Welcome and hello. This is Wait, You Haven't Seen? It's a show where we talk about movies, and specifically, we talk about a movie at least one of us has never seen before. I'm your host, Travis, aka TV's Travis. This is episode number 309. And our movie this week is 2006's Stranger Than Fiction. And here to talk with me about it because he wanted to talk about this one, it's Jonathan Newport. Jonathan, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. Update on not update, but reminder that the pronouns are they, please.
Hey, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I meant to check that, but the cat's got to me. And anyway, but yeah, how you doing? How did you fare with this week's choice?
So yeah, I had never seen this before. I remember it vaguely. Like I remember seeing trailers for it at some point. I'm sure I remember like a little bit of marketing about it, but I had a weird relationship with Will Ferrell for a long time where I didn't dislike him, but I liked him in small doses. I liked him as a supporting character.
You just couldn't plug in, right?
Yeah, it was nothing. It was a total me issue. It wasn't anything on him as a performer because he's
I had
very
the exact
funny.
same thing.
Yeah, he's very funny. He's very talented. He's good, but I couldn't do and I think it was more of like the over the top characters that he would do. It was just hard for me to really get into those. So I liked him as like Frank the Tank was great. When he would do sketches on SNL, they were great, but they were bite-sized pieces. And this movie came out and I was just like, and I didn't really jump to go see it.
Right.
So I went into this knowing basically nothing. I knew he was in it, and I remembered a trailer having something to do with him talking to a disembodied voice. Like I remembered the bit of, his imminent death and him standing at the bus stop and being like, wait, what? Why? Type of thing. That was it. That was all I knew going into it.
Yeah.
So what I want to know first is what's your history with this? When did you see this when it came out? Or
I saw it in early 2007, so pretty on the heels of when it came out, I guess. I'm not sure when in the year it came out, but back then, if a movie came out, it's so weird now. I think we've talked before, but it's so weird that like this would have been hitting DVD around early 2007 if it had been released in April the previous year. So who knows when it came out, judging by that. But I saw it in early 2007. It was me and a couple of friends just in one of their houses, and some parts of it like really hit me where I was at the time. And we'll get to that later. Not exactly subtext of the thing, but a little side text kind of thing, like I like to do, And I had the same thing. Like I didn't know what movie we were watching. It was one of those like just show up at your friend's house, sit down, have some popcorn, and what movie are we catching? And I was like, Will Ferrell movie. What have I gotten myself into? But I was also like immediately transfixed by that opening. That opening is even now is just magic. It's
really good.
It is like it is such a level of detail, not just in how neurodivergent people think about stats and what they're doing and all of that. And yes, I want to say this from the start. Okay. A lot of people are like, this character is autistic or, whatever. I'm not here to diagnose. I'm not a doctor, thank God. But and sure, it's easy to say that like, they didn't base this on an autistic or neurodivergent person. They base this on somebody they know. Well, let me introduce you into the factor of undiagnosed conditions,
Hmm.
and that a lot of us are running into it, especially those um, at this point in life. So chances are, whoever he was based on or whatever, and I mean, and Will Ferrell himself,
Hmm.
but like there's definitely 100% some of that going on, like to the point where I like scenes that we'll talk about later. Everything gets shoved off. Like affected me when I realized like the little microcosm of what was going on, and not just that he was going through a situation, but how it was probably going in his head, that
Hmm.
both that I saw and related to, but also had been conveyed to us.
Right.
Um, but anyway, that magic, or that opening, is just magic, and um, so that pulled me in, and he didn't seem to be like all of the. I don't want to say all of the humor was subtle. It's not, but it's kind of it's not gentle, but it's not over the top like Will Ferrell was. So I'm like, okay, and I go through it, and it gets me in that way. And ever since then, it's been one of my favorite movies, and I relate to it now. Like at the time, I knew I had ADHD, but I've also gone through figuring out autism and stuff like that, and just
Hmm.
seeing again so many of those layers that I recognize now in this story, add an completely different, not a different understanding, but a different appreciation for what Harold is going through.
Yeah.
And so it's always been really special to me, and it turns out it's really special to a lot of people. One morning, I just benignly said something about how great the opening was and how it just sticks with you on Threads, like some random Friday morning, and it got like 1,500 views and tons of comments on it.
Hmm.
And like and anytime since then somebody has mentioned it that has come across my feed, they're just they it's like you're talking about it's almost like you're talking about a stuffed animal, like it's something that just comforts you and helps give you just a little feeling of guidance and a little feeling of, oh, maybe this is more important. Maybe I
Hmm.
can forget about this stuff for a little bit and
Yeah.
focus
It's
on living my life, which is exactly that's the movie.
Yeah, it really, so the movie just starts off with this wonderful like macro view of the planet, and then zooms all the way in onto this
Mhm.
guy's bedroom, and then we get the first instance of
Very kind
narration.
of Truman Show, I
Yeah,
think, that
it's a
opening.
there's a little bit of
Yeah.
that there. Yeah.
Mhm.
Um and then we
Mhm.
get, our first instance of narration from the wonderful Emma Thompson as Karen Eiffel, but
Yeah.
we don't know her name yet. She's just the omniscient narrator of Harold Crick's life. And I love it because there's a little um there's a little bit of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy feel to it in the sort of narrator. I mean, narrator obviously has done a lot, but I really liked the kind of tongue in cheek nature of some of this, where it's like, he counts his brush strokes, and he's not a remarkable man, and he's very little words, and kind of all this stuff, just sort of laying out who
Right.
Harold
Yeah.
is. And
Mhm.
it was really just a wonderful introduction to this character. The music, by the way, I made a note that I really liked the music, and it
Lots of
gave me,
spoon.
and it also, it
Lots of
gave
spoon.
me a bit of a Ben Folds feel
Yeah.
to some of that music.
Yeah. Yeah, it was right. I felt it was right in the pocket for what was what was thought of as good indie music, both old
Hmm.
and new, but good indie music at the time. That was just right. That yeah, that felt so of the time.
Yep. And I also loved the visuals of kind of him visualizing things in the world as sort of an
Hmm.
overlay in some ways, kind of
Yeah.
not quite a heads up display, but some of it was, and like numbers popping up and things as he's going along throughout his daily life. I loved the look of that, and
Sure.
how that was used but not overused, and it was basically in the beginning, until things start to change, and then it kind of fell apart. We'll get to that. Um, But yeah, this whole opening was just a wonderful introduction to this character of Harold Crick, who is really boring, and he's
Mhm.
just dull IRS auditor guy.
The
That's
way she
all he
says
is.
the way she says her intro, the way she talks about his watch, enjoying the rush of the wind on its face and feeling exhilarated.
Hmm.
That's more than what she says about Harold.
Yeah,
That's how boring his life is.
right.
Like his watch is having a better time,
Hmm.
which I mean, you know, I believe it. That watch is something else. But
Right.
but yeah, he is boring. He is about as white bread numbers guy as you can be.
Yeah, and the to go through that whole thing and have all of that, and then when it breaks, when he starts to notice the voice,
Mhm.
um, that was like the only thing I really knew going into this movie was that at some point he recognizes and notices the narration, and then where's it going to go from there?
Mhm.
And so I loved how when it first happens, the visuals of it, because he goes to work the second day, but now things are just a little bit off. All of his numbers start kind of like falling apart, and he gets to work and he's not answering things right. Although the funny thing is, if you do the calculation, the number he gives when the guy asks him the second
Mhm.
time is actually correct, and then he corrects it to
Mhm.
the incorrect number. I thought that
Mhm.
was kind of funny, but you notice too, like he's in that scene, his suit's a little bit rumpled, like he's
Yeah.
just slightly off. And then when we go into that archive room, which I loved that room because that is the most movie set file room you'll ever see.
It is.
um
It feels like something out of 2001.
it really really does. But in
Yeah.
there, his top button is undone and his tie is loosened up and he's looking a little bit frazzled. So I
Mhm.
loved all of that. But I also like even something as simple as when he is at home brushing his teeth and he hears the voice and he stops, and the narration stopping and then trying to pick back up, and like
Yeah.
the narration voice almost getting flustered and frustrated because he's reacting to it, I really liked.
Mhm.
um and it was just the way like that whole thing unfolded to then go to his psychiatrist. um
Mhm.
was that might be my favorite scene in this entire movie, is
That
just
scene
just
has
that.
that scene has stuck with me for a while. Just occasionally I'll confuse it with the guy from Office Space. But the I'll randomly think of he said words like vacay and convo, and like just how horrible it would be to have a boss like that.
Oh yeah,
A
the
boss like
HR
that.
guy.
But
Yes,
also,
yes. I
yeah,
loved the
yeah.
HR
Oh,
guy.
oh, oh, yeah, that guy too.
The
I thought the HR guy was like John Delancey at first,
so
um,
it's funny is
but it's
I
not.
thought he looked familiar, but I couldn't place who it was.
Hmm.
But I was like, that face. There's something in the eyes that looks familiar to me, and it's Tom Hulse
Hmm.
who played the HR
Yeah.
guy. It's Mozart. He played Mozart
Hmm.
in Amadeus,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
mean I had no idea
Weird
that
laugh
that
and
was
all.
him. Talk about an actor. Like there are some actors that are tied to certain roles that they have done, but I
Hmm.
can't think of an actor offhand for me that is more tied to a single role than Tom Hulse and Amadeus. Like
Yeah,
for all the
probably.
times that certain actors just, it's like Anthony Hopkins as Hannibal Lecter or Harrison
Yeah.
Ford as Indiana Jones, but I can also like I can see them in other things. But you say I see Tom Hulse, and all I can think of is Amadeus. It's just so burned
To the
in.
point. Yeah, to the point that some years ago, the morning guy that would come on after the news on NPR, like
Mhm,
once the college radio station, um, not the college radio station, but like the university station, you know what
mhm.
I mean, would get off NPR and like do their block of like classical. One morning he came on and he talked about how it was Tom Hulse's birthday and how they grew up down the street from one another and how he knew him growing up, and
Oh
even made a
wow.
comment about how he didn't remember him having that laugh when they were kids. So yeah, point well taken. Yeah, that's, I mean, he's been in a ton of stuff, but that's all I can think about
Yep.
is
Oh yeah.
Amadeus.
That's the
And
first
then
name.
and then you hit his IMDb, you're like, oh, that guy.
Yep. Exactly.
But
Yeah. He's been in
mhm,
so much, and it just,
mhm,
I just can't, I can't separate them. And that's a me thing, but he's amazing.
right.
Like, cause he becomes a lot of his roles. He's very good at that.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
but then when Harold gets to his psychiatrist, played by Linda Hunt, that scene with Linda
That
Hunt
scene is incredible.
is absolutely magic for me. Like, it's just
It
so well
Yes.
done, because she is she she very much appreciates that he's going through something, and she knows
Mhm,
in her mind it has to be schizophrenia or whatever, because he's hearing voices, and he's like, well, and I
right.
captured some of that audio, we can talk about it. But just her
Good audio.
reactions to everything are so good. She's amazing,
Mhm.
because
Yeah, like
she never gets
she
demonstrative about it either. She's always just very, very
no.
calm and gentle.
No, you like she goes from treating, like, you can tell, like, she thinks he's absolutely bananas,
Oh yeah.
like in her way, but and she basically says, "Well, I don't know, why don't you do this? That's what I would do if I was having that problem." And to your point, she's so calm and
Mhm.
so collected. It's like you see her go. It's like you almost see her make that transition in her head, but she's completely unflappable the whole time.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like it's almost the same line of thinking, and it's just so hard to kind of follow her because she's so entrenched in that moment and trying to be neutral to it. And the thing she throws out just it ends up helping him,
Yeah. No, it
which
really does.
is its own, its own gag, um, which
Because we
obviously
basically, I
leads
mean,
us
the
to
whole
Dustin
movie,
Hoffman.
yeah, like the movie
Yeah.
hinges on Will Ferrell, first of all, and he is
Hmm.
absolutely, utterly fantastic in this movie. Like, he is spot on.
Everybody is perfectly cast, I think.
Oh yeah. Oh
Everybody is
yeah.
perfectly cast, like,
Um,
to the nth degree. Like, this, it's like that's part of the specialness of it, is just everything is so tight. It's so good. But anyway, you were saying Will Ferrell.
well, so I've come to appreciate Will Ferrell over the years a lot more than I used to. And because what I noticed is that he is able to play a role like this. Like, there is an earnestness and sort of a just like an endearing quality to him. And in this movie, he plays this role exactly the way it needs to be done. It needs to get just a little bit silly, but not too much.
Hmm.
And he's got to be able to get just a little bit dopey, but not too much. And it
Yeah,
was really a testament to his acting ability to play it as middle of the road as he did, because
right.
he very easily could have gone like overboard with it. It's sort of, I mean, you mentioned the Truman Show, and it kind of does remind me a little bit of that, in a way where Jim Carrey, playing the role of Truman in that movie, played it a lot more middle of the road, um, than
Yeah.
some of his other roles, and that was needed there. So yeah, I loved him, and of course we get the introduction of Maggie Gyllenhaal as Anna.
Hmm.
I had no
Yeah.
idea she was in this. That was a welcome surprise.
Yeah.
I like her a lot, and her character is
Yeah.
great. Like, I liked that her bakery is called the Uprising.
Yes.
It's a
Yeah.
wonderful name.
That's yeah. That's very clever, just for a bakery, and also just the type of person she is and the
Yeah,
place she's running.
yeah, because Harold, being an IRS auditor, right? He's got to go audit her because
Yeah.
she didn't pay all of her taxes, and she knows she didn't pay all of her taxes, and she did it on purpose. Um,
And he gets, like, assigned it because Buster gives
mm,
he's with them in the Space Odyssey room, like we were talking about,
yep.
and Harold is like trying to point out, "Hey, don't you hear that voice talking to me?"
Right.
And what's his name? Dave, played by Buster. Hey, Dave and Buster.
Hmm.
Um, but and and he um he starts brushing some files and sliding them into the file thing just to get something descriptive going.
Right.
And the voice says, it sounded like sand against the or waves against sand. And in fact, he thought about it, and he does it so much, and he hears it so much that his work can be just an endless, boundless ocean.
Hmm.
And he says, "Didn't you hear something about the endless, boundless ocean?" And Dave just looks at him and says, "What ocean?" And
Yeah.
and he says, "Okay, well, here are these two audits that this lady just walked in and handed us in the
Yeah.
middle of this." And he said, "There's a securities fraud case, and it's like a mile thick. And there's a baker, and he thinks about it. Tony Hale does, and he says, 'Why don't you try the baker?'
Yep.
Because like there's like a single sheet of paper in it, and it's
Yeah.
like, hey,
Because
this is
like Dave,
you
yeah.
look like you're kind of maybe losing your mind. Why don't
Yeah.
you do something easy?"
Dave is a good friend, and he's like, look,
Very good,
the cheese is
very
sliding
good.
off of your cracker. Take this easy one. Here you go. Um, and so he meets her, and of course, she's just very like anti-establishment, anti the man, right? She's yelling at him, calling him the
Yeah,
tax man. The whole bakery is yelling at him. It's perfect. Like
yeah.
it's
Even
absolutely
the homeless
amazing.
guy is screaming at him about being a tax man.
Yep.
It's great. Yeah.
Um, so then when he leaves the psychiatrist and she says to send him to somebody who does literary stuff, I again no clue whatsoever that Dustin Hoffman was in this. So for him to pop up,
Oh,
I got excited because I'm like I love
you're like,
Dustin
okay,
Hoffman,
here we go. Here we go.
and like what are we gonna do
Yeah, and
here? And
yeah.
he's wonderful. He's just wonderful throughout the whole thing. Like when they meet, I I'm trying to figure out why, but when they meet for the first time, he's walking around and he asks him if he wants coffee, and he starts getting coffee from the coffee machine. Um, Harold says no. He pulls the coffee out before it's done pouring, and he's drinking it on his way to his office, where he has a pot of coffee brewed ready to go. So when he gets into the
Mhm.
office, he just throws the coffee out and gets like he's constantly pouring himself coffee or pouring it
Mhm.
back or something. It cracked me up the whole time.
I I they nailed to me. They nailed the slightly eccentric. And let's
Oh
be
yeah.
clear, he is as these things go, he is only slightly eccentric.
Hmm.
But they nailed the slightly eccentric college professor. They nailed what it's like to be in his office. They know what it's like to be around him at awkward times when he's like, picking his teeth because he has this lifeguard thing that he has to do, and he just finished eating lunch and he has no time, and so Harold's standing there in the in the locker room with tons of naked fat asses everywhere,
Oh yep.
and just talking to him about this whole checklist that he has, and is he in this? What kind of story is this in? What is the what is?
Hmm.
And um and he's just and he takes out a dental pick and he's like cleaning his teeth, and
I love that, and
he
I
he
really
gets he gets up
love.
on the lifeguard stand and he has the novel with the plastic bag,
Yep.
and it's just and yes, and he at the end of one scene I noticed he had to leave for class, and so he tossed the coffee that wasn't finished, tossed it back in the pot and put it back on the burner.
Yep.
And like
Oh
I
yeah.
have I have known that professor, and it slayed me. Even the weird crap on his desk, like he
Hmm.
had a paperweight that was a peanut.
Yep. Oh yeah. No,
Like
his
everything about it,
his
everything
whole
about it.
character was great, and what I loved about it was Harold goes to him because he's like a literary genius, right? He's the literary professor, and he's trying to
Oh
figure out
yeah.
why he's got this narration going on in his head. So he sits him down.
Mhm.
Well, first he's like, "I can't help you," and then
Mhm.
decides he will when he says something about the little did he know thing.
I wrote
Um,
papers on Little Did He Know.
And so
Yeah.
then he's like, come back tomorrow. And when he comes back the second time, he's got his list of 23 questions, and they're going to be strange, but it's imperative that you answer them properly because he's got to figure out what kind of story this is. And I just love that that's his
Yeah.
method for figuring it out. Like, I'm going to humor this guy.
Yeah.
I'm going to go with this. Let's see where this goes. Because as an academic exercise, it's pretty interesting. So he just goes for it. And like, meanwhile, you had, I also had a note on this that this movie was got to very intrusive thoughts at one point when he's in the bakery
Oh yeah.
with Anna, and he starts to, the narration starts to go a little randy in his head.
Askance. Yeah.
I was like, oh, yep, this is what it sounds like when someone else is reading your intrusive thoughts. Wonderful.
Right. Yeah.
But I liked how like the way things went, and then because it simultaneously for most of this movie, I had this certain idea of how it was unfolding. Now, as we do with this show, there is no restraint on spoilers here. This also is a movie that is nearly 20 years old now. So just bear that in mind if you're worried about getting anything spoiled for you. It's not really that kind of movie, but still, I thought,
Yeah, it like this was my fourth time watching it, and it is just it's like, even though you know what's going to happen, it's just it still hits every time.
But I loved the way things would unfold, because for the longest time it felt like there were two worlds going on. And it reminded me a bit of a movie that I watched for this show a while back called The Nines with Ryan Reynolds. Where in that movie, his character is creating these realities and existing inside of them, but he doesn't understand or know that he's doing it. He's not doing it consciously. It's a very weird existential movie. But I had some of that feeling going on here, where like we had the world of Harold and Anna and all of this going on, and then we get the reveal or the introduction of Karen Eiffel, the author. And the way she's introduced in the movie is looking down on
Straight out of
Harold.
City of Angels.
Yes. Yep. Exactly that. And looking down on things. And so it's very much the omniscient, godlike figure. And so I'm thinking, okay, so this is all in her, in her head as part of her fiction. And the movie even like leads you down that path a little bit with the way she interacts with the world at first. And so to then have the reveal. And so what I liked about that was throughout the movie, there were parts of it where I'm like, yeah, this is absolutely a scene where a writer is trying to figure something out. And so they're throwing things against the wall, or the fact that they get, Harold and Anna have their little meet cute on the train or on the bus, where she just happens to get on the same bus he's on, and she doesn't want to talk to him, but they do end up talking, and he does apologize to her. And they flirt a little bit, and his whole thing of like, I'm flirting. What do I do? I'm going to make an ass of myself. I got to get out of here. And he gets off the bus, and then the narrator tells him he was 27 blocks away. It's like, oh, that's so far. Like, how far was he riding this bus? But I love
that in Chicago. That's a long walk.
Yeah. Now, it is basically Chicago, but they never name it. Like, they never tell you what city he's in or what state.
Right. The only reference that I caught was when he makes the line about something Metro Transit Authority, and I'm like, oh, that's Chicago. And I looked it up, and it's Chicago.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not. It's unsaid, but if you know Chicago, like, you're going to recognize it. Like, it's.
But I loved the way all of that was going on, and because there were these moments that feel like tropey story moments, and then you're like, yes, but it's an author telling us this story. However, his character is reacting to it, or her character in this case is reacting to it. So then when we get to the point where Harold has done a little bit of sleuthing, and now he figures out that that Karen Eiffel exists in his world, or he exists in her world, however you want to really look at that. I was like, oh, that wasn't expected at all. I like that.
No.
And it was a nice twist on that trope. and for them to be able to meet. And then it starts the questions rolling in my head of like, well, okay, so if Harold exists and he's real in the world of Karen Eiffel, who's writing these novels, how many of her other characters are real? And
Right.
on top of that, she has to deal with this now because when she realizes that he exists, she now dives down that path of like, I've killed characters in all of my books. Did I kill them type of thing? Like there's layers to this and it gets very
Not
meta.
just characters, but like according to Doctor, I want to say Hilbert. Is it Hilbert? Um,
I think so. Yeah. Professor Hilbert.
yeah, yeah. I didn't want to be confused with Hibbert. Um, according to him, he's like when Harold's in his office and sees her on like some archive footage that he's looking at to see, oh, who's this author that's narrating this guy's life. Um, and he hears her voice and he says, "Hey, that's the the chick." And he says, "Oh, that's not good." And he's like,
Right?
"Why is that not good?" He said, "She kills all of her heroes."
Mm-hmm.
And that hits her. She's like, I've killed them all, and they were good people.
But what I
And
like is that,
mhm,
yeah, but I love the fact that the movie asks those questions, but doesn't give you a definitive answer of this has ever
mhm,
happened before with one of her characters
right,
or why it's happening.
right. It's
I
all
like
assumed. It's
that.
all assumed.
It is,
Yeah,
but it's
same.
ambiguous. Like you can easily
Hmm.
say maybe it's never happened before and this is the first time it's happened, or it's been happening every
Hmm.
single time, but none of them knew it necessarily. Like there's all this kind of stuff that it goes through. And I like that because
Yeah,
it leaves you questioning what's going on without having to hold your hand through it. But you don't need any of those answers in order for this story to make sense. Um,
right. I,
and it's a very interesting and uplifting story in a lot of ways. For as dour as it can feel at times, where like you got this really boring guy leading a really boring life, and an author who's got writer's block who kills off all of her characters, and you're finding out that this character is going to die by the end because that's what this author does. But for him to like take that as a way to, all right, I need to live my life because that's what Professor Hilbert eventually tells him is like, you got to live your life. You can't, you can't not do that. This is your wake up call. You don't know how long you've got. So live, do the things you want to do. Um, and he does that. And I like it. I like him learning to play a little bit of guitar. I like him taking
yeah.
a little time to relax. It's funny that the whole thing basically takes place over about 4 weeks.
Mhm.
Um, and a lot happens in that 4 weeks, but a lot can happen in 4 weeks if you're motivated. So,
Yeah. Hmm.
but
Yeah.
yeah, there's
I'm
so
sorry. Go ahead.
much. I just there's a lot of really interesting kind of philosophical things going on with that of like really do get out there, take things one day at a time because you don't know if it's your last day or not.
Yeah,
Um,
lots of things about agency.
yeah, 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 definitely.
And that's what struck me the first time. I mean, it like I I saw the love story, but I mean, it's fine that bypassed me the first time at the same time. Um, but what grabbed on me the first time was this kind of idea of, and this isn't, to your point, this isn't explicitly dealt with in the movie. I almost said the book. I saw a review, somebody said that it kind of plays out like a book, and it really does,
It does.
even to that point of having so many open-ended things. Um, and like the way those play out are the way they would play out, open-ended in a book. But it's this idea of like, she I thought has this whole this whole world that she exists in and writes her books in,
Mhm.
and all of that. And that's part of what shatters her. Like when she realizes this, that there's a connection with a real person. Like when he calls her office, he finds
Yeah.
out how to get through improper appropriation of work files, and he calls her, and she, like, that is such, it just completely wrecks her to
Oh,
know
for
that this
sure.
person is real. And she plays that so well. Like Emma Thompson plays rattled so well in
Hmm.
general. But like it's this idea that we like to think that we exist in our own worlds, and that these actions, these choices that we make don't really affect other people. We have a lot of that going on right now.
Hmm.
And but they do. Like you can be nice to the person at the grocery store, and it can affect their entire day. I've been that person.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Um and like you don't just have agency for you, but you have a little bit of agency for others, and how just the interconnectedness of everything. And not even, yeah, not even in like a hippie way, like in an actual working functional way.
Yeah.
And
And it also does bring us, it gives us some of the idea of like a quote unquote greater good, because at one point Hilbert tells him like you
yeah.
have to die because this is her masterpiece of a novel,
Mhm.
and for that to happen your character has to die. Like that's the way the
Mhm.
story has to end. And
Right.
that somehow her story and her writing this story is more important in the grand scheme, right? They use the grand
Right.
scheme line, than Harold's
Mhm.
life is, because everyone will die at some point. So why not have that death
Mhm.
have some meaning to it for other people? But meanwhile, to Harold, it's like, yeah, but then I got to die, and I don't want to die,
But
type of
yeah,
thing.
I
And
uh,
so
yeah,
there's a push and pull there, for that, because
sure.
yes, in the grand scheme of all people, one death doesn't matter. But in Harold's world, one death does matter. And
Yeah,
for Harold and
that is
Anna
wild.
too,
Right.
because Anna is now part of his world. And
Mhm.
there's that, which is a new thing for him. His entire world has changed in a matter of 4 weeks. And I also like that, in storytelling, you've got your different voices and your different narrators. And in this case, like our omniscient narrator
Right.
becomes just another member of the world, and now we only know what she knows.
Mm. Right.
So it's kind of an interesting layer to that, of like taking the omniscient narrator and then saying, yeah, but turns out this omniscient narrator isn't really that omniscient and doesn't know everything. I
Mhm.
really enjoyed that, a lot. I thought that was really, really cool.
I also enjoyed
There's a ton.
how it
Go ahead.
yeah, I also enjoyed like just watching it as a creative.
Hmm.
Like they get a lot, they get so much of that right. It's hilarious. Like her, like at first she doesn't want to say the words writer's block. She
Right.
will not admit that she has that, even though we find out that she's been working on this book. Like she had an interview for this book that she's writing 10 years prior, and that it was slated to come out then. And so, like, she's definitely got some writer's block, but it's so, she's just completely in denial. And one line that I heard from somebody we haven't mentioned, Queen Latifah, who is just
Oh, she's great.
incredible, just yeah, just fantastic. And she comes in as kind of a, like a writer help slash ghostwriter,
Hmm.
not quite a ghostwriter, but kind of like writing, like an assistant. She calls herself,
Yeah.
and it's she's there to, like, do some brainstorming, get the index cards, figure some stuff out, right?
Yep. Oh yeah.
And at one point she, like, they had been somewhere to observe something, research. If you're a writer, you know. And she asks her, "Have you, excuse me, have you written anything?" And she's like, "No, no, no, not anything." And she said, "You haven't written anything. You haven't done anything. You haven't made these lists that I told you to. You haven't done this. You haven't even gotten new typing paper." And I'm like, the way she goes over that is like she's covering all the bases because she knows how creatives work.
Yep.
Like, and sometimes new typing paper, like oh my God, everybody knows how a new planner will fix you, right?
Oh yeah,
And like,
absolutely.
it's just like it's like hello. I don't know what that is. But it's like whatever side of life they're trying to highlight in whatever part of this movie,
Mhm.
they get it. Like they've really done their homework,
Yeah.
and it's just there's nothing. It's so funny because the way like the narration goes and all of this, like you pointed out that you're dealing with the narration from her part, so there's a lot of processing stuff going on and in all of that in it. But like the story, it for that reason can kind of sound like once you get kind of where it's going, there is like a little bit of a not flimsiness, but for lack of a better word, it's like, oh, she's writing a book and these are the story beats and blah 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 blah.
Mhm.
But they everything is filled in so well that doesn't even stand out. Like
Right.
you can't see it there if you want it to, I don't think. And it's just everything is filled in so well, and they get like every time they're like, okay, let's focus on this part of the story. It's like they like all eyes turn to that, and it's just like it's everything is captured so well,
Mhm.
and there was so much work and love and care put into this that pretty much any angle you can think of is just there to grab you.
Well, and it's
And
incredibly
yeah,
impressive that Zach Helm wrote this movie, and this was his first feature film script to get made.
mercy.
First one.
That's a feat.
So it's kind of a blessing and a curse, right? Because now he's sort of
Hmm.
he hasn't done a ton since then in terms of like his IMDb resume isn't supremely long. He did a movie, another he wrote and then he directed a movie called Mr. Megorium's Wonder Emporium with Dustin Hoffman like a year after this,
Also with Dustin Hoffman, yeah.
and he's written one other movie. And Mark Forster directed this, and he's
Well,
done
he's
quite a
done a
bit.
bunch of stuff.
Um, but it was just kind of like this was almost a lightning in a bottle thing. Like they got the right script and the right director to do this, where they didn't overdo any parts of it, and they cast it really well, and they knew what they were doing, and it's this self-contained little story about this author
Mhm.
and this person who is a character in her book, and I loved all of it. Like I loved how it all coalesced and it all came together, and the fact that uh, there's things going on outside of the narrator's purview to her character as she's writing the character,
Mhm.
but everything she's writing is still happening exactly the way she's writing it. Is kind of it's pretty neat to do that, and I really
Yeah.
enjoyed it. And
And again, it's not too heavy-handed, which is
right,
remarkable. Like there is so much that they could have just barely leaned into, and it would have been overdone.
there's
But
a
they
lot,
didn't. And
yeah,
and it's not like they went up to the line. That just they played everything just well.
because they didn't try to like overdo anything.
Yeah, they weren't there to
And it was
impress. They
just a
were there to
story
tell a
about a guy.
story.
Yep.
Yes.
I also love that. I love the fact that the book she's writing is called Death and Taxes, and
Hmm.
it's a tax man, and he's supposed to die at the end of it. And what I like is
Hmm.
at the end of the movie, he doesn't die,
Hmm.
and she doesn't pay her taxes. Um, the two things that are
Hmm.
inevitable in life are death and taxes, and
Hmm.
neither of them happen here, and I love that. I captured some
Zing.
audio though. There's a lot of. I did not anticipate
There's so many
the
good
number of audio
ones.
clips I was going to record while watching this.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
I had to slow myself down actually at one point. I'm like, okay, I'm just capturing every line in this scene at this point. Like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, I cut you off. You had something you were going to say real quick.
Oh, no. No, no, you're fine. You're fine. Go ahead.
So a few of the things I got, number one, like that opening we talked about, just how magical that is and how it sets the stage for the entire movie, the whimsical music and him going around. And I love like just a little thing like
89 times 1,417.
126,113.
That adds up.
like it's just
Sorry.
perfectly done.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, like when he meets so there's a great scene where he spent all day working on the audit at the bakery upstairs. She brought him the files. I love that when she brings him out the box of files and he looks at it
Yeah, because they're all
horrified.
screwed up. Yeah. Mhm.
And the fact that she says, "No, I'm actually quite fastidious. I just did this to mess with you."
Mhm.
Piling them all in a box, but he spends all day up there and he's doing that and he keeps trying to like get information from her and she's not helpful and all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, he comes down and they learn a little bit more about each other. And this is again that kind of this is playing into that romantic comedy angle of things where
Mhm.
she makes cookies. It's the end of the night. She's making them specifically for him. And you kind of know that immediately because why else would she be
Right.
baking cookies that late if the
Right.
shop
She's
is
not going to
closed?
sell day old cookies. Right.
Exactly.
Right.
But he doesn't catch on to that. But it's just a wonderful moment. And like you learn that, oh, she went to law school, but she was much better at helping other people study and baking and doing all this kind of stuff than she was in her own studies. And I liked this line from her.
I just figured if I was going to make the world a better place, I would do it with cookies.
And you know what? I'm here for it
That's a
because I want
winning
somebody
strategy.
to make the world a better place with cookies.
Yeah.
I
True.
am a huge fan of a podcast called Aquillow. Frequent guest on this show,
Ooh.
Amy Frost, is the narrator of Aquillow. It's written by our mutual friend, J.F. Dubois. And that character in Aquillow of Miriam she does a lot of good work with baking. And Anna Pascal in this movie kind of reminded me of like if Miriam from Aquillow were very punk rock, you would get Anna. Like she's changing the world, she's doing stuff, she's really good at what she does, but this version of that character is like going to just flip you off, give you the middle finger and also a plate of cookies.
Nice. Yeah.
And she was just perfect at that. And I just love that because you can change the world with a plate of cookies. You really can.
Yeah, like I'm saying, be kind. Like it's just
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Queen Latifah, I only really got one of her lines. There's actually another one that's coming up, but I loved she
You gotta
wants
limit
to
to one or two, or you're gonna get everything she says because it's just everything is just clipped so right with her.
And first of all, she's amazing in everything she's ever in. Like
Yeah.
she just doesn't miss. But this character of Penny really wants to help. And I just liked this.
And I will gladly and quietly help you kill Harold Crick.
Like she's laying out the rules. I don't like loud music, all this kind of stuff. And then just I will gladly and quietly help you kill Harold Crick. Just so well delivered.
I want to point out, their little symbolism jabs are very literary too. And her last name is Escher.
Yep.
Obviously, an artist known for confusing dimensions.
All of the names in this were very clever and had some tie to somebody in the real world dealing with either like physics or mathematics or art. Crick and Escher and Hilbert and everybody like that.
Very literature approach to that. Yeah.
I mentioned the scene, but the scene with Linda Hunt, it's such a good scene. Like immediately you get.
No, it's not schizophrenia. It's just a voice in my head.
And she's looking at him like that's schizophrenia.
Sir?
You just described the thing. And then
Yeah.
she says, this exchange, this is 2 clips back to back, but this exchange is great.
Mr. Crick, you have a voice speaking to you.
No, not to me. About me. The voice isn't telling me to do anything. It's telling me what I've already done. Accurately and with a better vocabulary.
That second line, accurately and with a better vocabulary, is so good. It's just, I loved that. And he genuinely wants help. And when he asks her for help,
what would you suggest that I do?
I would suggest you take prescribed medication.
Other than that?
He's like, yeah, but what are my other options?
And, it's funny because this isn't a slapstick movie, yet I found myself laughing out loud. Like, it was more than just
some parts that are very funny.
Yeah, like, it's not just the, like, chuckle type of laugh, the smirk and like, haha, that was a clever line. Like, that genuinely, his reaction to, what about other than that, made me laugh out loud. It was so good.
Yeah,
when
like,
when Go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead, and then I'll follow up after you.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, when he's talking to Dave in the file room, and
right,
I'm being followed by a woman's voice.
I'm being followed by a woman's voice, and Dave's reaction is perfect. He's just like, oh.
The response is amazing. Yeah, go ahead.
It's so good. He responds with,
oh.
But it just there's so many of those little moments when he's the first time he notices the narration while he's brushing his teeth is spot on. Like, Will Ferrell just crushes the scene because he stops, he's talking to the toothbrush, and then he keeps going, and at one point says,
all right, who just said Harold just counted brushstrokes? And how do you know I'm counting brushstrokes?
I would react the same way, because how would you know that?
Yeah. Yeah, like, how are you in my head? Who are you?
Mm-hmm.
Stop, please. I wanted to mention the rest of Dave's response. He says, Harold, how are you being followed? You're not even moving.
Yeah. How are you being followed? You're not even moving.
Yeah. And also when he first meets Hoffman, did you get any of that?
Oh yeah, I've got some Hoffman coming. Don't worry.
Okay. Okay. I'll wait for that, because you may have gotten the line that I thought.
But there's a little bit more with Will Ferrell. I like this.
Sure. Yeah.
She's narrating. Oh.
She's narrating. Like, what's the voice saying? She's narrating my life. And then his apology on the bus.
I ogled you.
I like the use of ogled. Ogled is a very good term to use there. When he makes his romantic comedy gesture, is what I like to call it. The moment in a romantic comedy where somebody shows up with the thing. This was another one where
such a good scene. Oh my God.
It's so well done because he is being 100% earnest. First of all, there is no way that just walking up to somebody who you've already had interactions with and has made it clear that she does not like you, and saying,
honestly, I only figured it out up to I want you.
Oh yeah. Like, just coming up with I want you, that shouldn't work. It does, but it shouldn't. But I also love that he's like, I only figured it out up to that point. Like, I only figured out what I was doing up to the grand moment in the street, in the story.
Yeah,
but
because you don't know how she's going to react, right?
Right. Oh, absolutely. But it also just feels like a writer coming up with that and like not thinking past there yet. But he walks up with a box, and it's a box full of paper bags, and they've got different colored tape on them and stuff like this. But then he tells her,
I brought you flowers.
And it's so well done because he brought her flowers, and immediately I knew what it was. He brought her many different types of flour for baking. such
Yeah,
a
just
wonderful thing because he pays attention. He understands
Mhm.
how important flour is to what she does and how important baking is to her.
Mhm.
And just the gesture of I brought you flowers is so good. I loved that. That just
Right,
tickled me.
and that plays out in his style. It's not like they came to the point. You talk about the writer. It's not like they came to the point and said, "Well, okay, well, they need to they need to meet up on a night, and this needs to happen," and blah blah blah. It's and then they tack that on
Hmm.
to the character. No, it's super organic.
Yep.
It's just except for to your point, the little bit of movie magic about how they close that gap pretty quickly. Um,
Yeah.
but aside from that, I mean, it's a book. What can you do? Um, but that is just it's so not in a Hallmark way, but it's very heartwarming.
Hmm.
It
Yes.
is very it's very there's like a very subtle almost electricity about it. There's just so much life in that in that moment because he is so earnest and she is too. I thought they had wonderful chemistry together.
Oh yeah. No, they were great. They
Um,
really were.
one at one point they're laying in bed and he's going through him saying he loves her and all of that, and again playing out how it would with his words and his pace and all that. But I was just like, I 100% believe this.
Hmm.
Which, again, for a story like this, especially with Will Ferrell, you don't know that's exactly gonna happen.
Hmm.
Um,
But they make
like,
it believable because they make them feel like real characters. They like
yeah,
real people.
everything feels so. There is just such an overwhelming humanity to everything.
Hmm. Yes. Um, when he shows up at Karen Eiffel's apartment, and Queen Latifah Penny answers the door.
I'm Penny. I'm Kane's assistant.
Oh, I'm Harold, her main character.
What a wonderful introduction. Her main
Hmm.
character. It's great. All right, Professor Hilbert. Outside of the psychiatrist scene, most of the stuff with Professor Hilbert was some of the funniest and some of my favorite stuff going on in this movie.
Just little drops here and there. It was brilliant.
Because he comes into the office, he's talking to him, and Professor Hilbert's like, "I can't help you. Whatever, go away." But then he
Yeah,
says the
yeah.
"little did he know" thing, and first you get this, which this just made me laugh.
Little did he know it means there's something he doesn't know. That means there's something you don't know. Did you know that?
It's the "do you know that" at the end that got
Mhm.
me. And then he tells him, "All right, come back at 9:45 tomorrow morning," and
Mhm.
then you get this reaction.
10 seconds ago, you said you wouldn't help me.
It's been a very revealing 10 seconds, Harold.
Very revealing 10 seconds. Yes, it has. So when he comes back and he's answering him all the he's asking him all the questions, and Harold, it makes sense for him to be getting a little weirded out by the questions because they just get increasingly sillier and more like out
Right.
there, and he's like, what does this have to do with anything? But then you get,
Aren't you relieved to know you're not a golem?
Yes, I am relieved to know that I'm not a golem.
Good.
I mean, I would be too. Let's be real.
Mhm.
But it was just like, that was such a perfect reaction to it because, again, the earnestness of Professor Hilbert being, "Aren't you relieved?" And it's like, this is so ridiculous. Why are you making me answer these questions? I loved it.
Well, I mean, he had just gotten done asking something like, what he's doing is going through all of these literary devices
Yep.
he
Oh
knows,
yeah.
and one of the questions is, um, has 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 anybody um, bought you any strange gifts? Have you seen any strange gifts
Yes.
outside your house? Tools, pastries, wooden horses.
Wooden horses, like, okay.
Yeah,
And even there's a logic to what he's doing. And he
of
says,
course. Yeah.
Agreed. But let's start at ridiculous and move backwards.
start at ridiculous and move backwards, because the whole idea that Harold comes to him with in the first place is completely ridiculous. I'm hearing a voice in my head narrating my life that isn't my voice. Like, it's not, because, and I know there is a percentage of people that claim to not have an inner monologue. I definitely have an inner monologue.
I definitely do. Yeah.
But for him to, like, what Harold is experiencing is not an inner monologue. This is a completely separate voice talking about whatever it is that he's doing. So for Hilbert to be like, let's start with ridiculous and then we'll work backwards to, go Occam's razor. Take the most outlandish but simple answer. Might be true, probably not, and we'll work from there. So I really liked that.
Okay, those are bad answers. Let's make sure they're bad answers.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I also liked his reasoning for not wanting to help at first.
And beside that, this semester I'm teaching 5 courses. I'm mentoring 2 doctoral candidates, and I'm the faculty lifeguard at the pool.
Of course, he's the faculty lifeguard at the pool.
They always got to throw in. They always got to throw in that third random thing, like I'm organizing the staff Christmas party, or something like that.
Exactly.
I thought that was a good.
But I like that becomes like a thing, because the next time he's talking to him, he's getting ready to go out and do a shift at the pool. So that's that scene we were talking about earlier, where he's picking his teeth after lunch. And I love the absurdity of that scene, because I love a juxtaposition like that, where they're having this important conversation. It's very important for Harold. Hilbert's taking it seriously, but he's also doing something, he's multitasking at the same time. Meanwhile, we're in a locker room with a bunch of naked guys in the background just showering. A bunch of professors and faculty at this university just standing in the communal shower in their shower shoes. It was so ridiculous, and I loved it.
White butts everywhere. It was crazy.
Oh yeah. I also like how Harold wanted him to basically tell him it was like this kind of strange coincidence. And again, Hilbert.
Meeting an insurance agent the day your policy runs out is coincidence. Getting a letter from the emperor saying that he's visiting is plot. Having your apartment eaten by a wrecking ball is something else entirely.
Because that scene, when he tells him to go home and do nothing, right? Just do nothing for a day. Let's see if the plot finds you. I think Harold took that to a bit of an extreme when he pulls the bottle out and pees without leaving the couch. I was like, really? But that whole scene,
like, really, we're doing this.
What I loved about it was that was still at that moment. I'm thinking that this is like a fictional world, because it's so unhinged. Like, he's watching these nature documentaries, and each progressive cut of this nature documentary is crazier and crazier and more outlandish.
Crazier and crazier.
And then the phone starts
to the point
ringing.
where at one point the voiceover on the nature documentary makes a Silence of the Lambs reference, and says something about what would go nice with what would go with some nice kidney beans and a Chianti.
Yep.
I know it's all in the movie, but it's just, everything is just ramping up hard.
Yeah, and then it all comes to a head, and it ends with that wrecker just busting through the wall, and for it to be literally a mistake, right? That's the best part. Is, oh, sorry, and they just leave. Like the crew just leaves, and he's got a big hole in the wall. Absolutely.
They Homer Simpson, like, back into the bush. Like,
yep, exactly.
Wanted to mention about Hilbert, like when they first meet and they're talking, and he has to like leave for class or whatever, and they're walking along, and at one point Hoffman just drops this line. He says, "Yeah, dramatic irony. It'll laugh you every time."
Oh yeah, it's so good. I also loved his pancake analogy and the exchange on that.
Harold, if you'd pause to think, I believe you'd realize that that answer is inextricably contingent upon the type of life being led, and of course the quality of the pancakes.
It's true though.
Yeah, because he had told him he had told him something about like, oh yeah, just don't live the life you've been leading. Live the life you want to. Go wherever. Do whatever. Eat pancakes every day.
Mm-hmm.
And Harold just says, but I don't want to eat pancakes all day. And then he says that, like, well, hey, you're not thinking about the pancakes, boy.
Right.
Like, mm-hmm.
Listen, we're changing the world with cookies, and we're living our life eating pancakes every day. I can get behind all of this. Like, I'm down.
Yeah.
I'm down for that. He also, like, then he has to later on, Hilbert has to be the heavy voice where he tells him things like,
In the grand scheme, it wouldn't matter.
you know, Harold dying, in the grand scheme, it wouldn't matter. But it still does. Like, it's that weird dichotomy of it doesn't, but it does. Because it all depends on your perspective. From Harold's perspective, it absolutely does. From Hilbert's outside perspective, it really doesn't, because he just doesn't know this guy. But also,
you have to die.
You have to die because
it's the nature of all tragedies, Harold. The hero dies, but the story goes on forever.
And that's where Hilbert's coming from on that. And what Eiffel has kind of based her whole career off of is doing this until she meets Harold and she realizes what a difference that will make for that one person who, to his credit, gets to a point where he's accepting of it. Which I thought was a wonderful twist. I'm going to get to that, but I got a couple more clips I got to play because Emma Thompson, being Emma Thompson, is fantastic as Karen Eiffel. And a stigma in the chat said this earlier, but I would not have any problem whatsoever with Emma Thompson narrating my life. We can go for it. But I love when she's sitting out in the rain, watching the bridge, imagining car wrecks. And then there's Queen Latifah. There's Penny sitting there next to her. And Penny's got the umbrella, but she doesn't hold it over Karen either. And Karen's sitting there smoking and mentions the nicotine patch. And I loved.
I don't need a nicotine patch, Penny. I smoke cigarettes.
It's such a great answer to that. Like, I don't need it. Why would I need a nicotine patch? I'm getting my nicotine the old fashioned way by smoking cigarettes. It was just a great delivery of that line. Even like when she goes to the hospital too, because Karen she has writer's block. She has to figure out how, in her mind, there is no way to end this story other than killing off her character, but she doesn't know how to do it. Right? She can't, as she says,
as much as I would like to, I cannot simply throw Harold Crick off a building.
Which, taken out of context, sounds really bad. But like, as much as she would like to, that will not work for her story to just simply do that. It can't just be, and then he died. So she's got to try and figure this out, which is the going to the hospital bit, right? And Penny finding her at the hospital. And can you imagine being this doctor? You're working in a hospital. This is like ER, ICU area, and this random woman just walks up to you.
Excuse me, where are the dying people?
Where are the dying people? Okay, I also loved, this is from the first part of the movie, but
if one had asked Harold, he would have said that this particular Wednesday was exactly like all the Wednesdays prior.
That's a great line, but I particularly liked
Wednesday.
Thank you. Yes. I almost said that out loud every time she said Wednesday. I'm like, it's just like, it's so classic.
The way she says that,
intentional.
Yes. And there's one other movie that always comes to mind with the day of Wednesday. Because this will now be in that same realm for me. Is Emma Thompson saying
Wednesday.
Did you ever see the movie Multiplicity with Michael Keaton?
No, not yet.
So 90s comedy, Michael Keaton somehow figures out how to clone himself, and it goes on. But in that movie, Eugene Levy is in it. And his character, the way he says Wednesday, because he like overpronounce it as like Wednesday. And it's not the same as Emma Thompson saying it here, which sounds very proper and like it's just, I cannot help but hear that word pronounced that way, and now I'm going to hear it this way as well. So it's like one of those two ways is how I hear either Wednesday or Wednesday.
It's like you have the spectrum of Wednesday or Wednesday.
Yep.
And
exactly.
if you zoom in on Wednesday, you have another spectrum where it's Wednesday or Wednesday.
Yep.
And yeah, that's pretty great.
And finally, the one more from her.
It was a nice enough evening, and in any other circumstance it would have seemed commonplace. In fact, the only thing that made this night significant was the morning it preceded.
Ah, it's such a good line. Just that whole bit. Because we had the trope subversion of like, it's not a fictional world being told to us, it's the real world where the author exists. And all of that. So there's a twist. But then for Harold to be given the manuscript with the ending that she has come up with, she figured out how to kill him, to kill Harold for her book. And she gives it to him. He takes it to Hilbert, who reads it and tells him, he doesn't read it at first. And Hilbert tells him, like, no, I've read it. There's no other way to do it than you die. It has to be that way. And then for Harold to read the book. He reads the whole thing sitting on the train or the bus, which cracked me up, right? That he makes it all the way to like the MTA, the Transit Authority garage. They're going through the car wash and all of that. But he reads the whole thing. And then he finds her as she's going somewhere and tells her, I've read it. I understand. Finish your book. He's accepting of it because he understands like what it means and how the scene is important.
He understands he understands that he's a role.
Yes. And he's willing to give up his life because of, and we still don't know at this point what it is. We're not told that yet. So Hilbert knows it, Eiffel knows it, and now Harold knows what it is, but we as an audience don't. So then we get that wonderful last night, right, where he sets up space camp for Dave as an adult, which was a great moment where earlier on, yeah, I love that callback because earlier on, you know, Dave mentions wanting to go to space camp and he tells him, aren't you old? And he's like,
you're never too old to go to space camp, dude.
You're never too old, ever. Shout out to Tony Hale, by the way, as Dave. Tony Hale's great.
Truly.
So he sets that up. He has that last night with Anna. They have a wonderful time just watching old movies and go to bed, and they have like a nice conversation. And then he gets up because he knows the next morning is when it all happens. And we're getting the return of the narration as Karen tells us what's going on. That's where the whole thing with his watch from earlier. His watch now, everything for the last 4 weeks has been running 3 minutes ahead. He's been 3 minutes ahead of where he normally would have been. I loved all of that. And to have it unfold the way that it does. And it's true. The way the book ended initially is very good. And I like how that plays out, right? Where he saves the kid that we've been seeing throughout the movie in little pieces here and there with his brand new bike and how excited he is for his bike. And the woman driving the bus, right? She's trying to find a job. She
Yeah,
finally
a kid
finds a
wipes out in
job.
front of the bus, and Harold has to go down and like yank him out,
Yep.
basically.
And like that was kind of that moment that I'm pretty sure that's when he read it, understood why it had to be him, because no one else was going to. And then the movie flips all that on its head, because we get the aftermath of him getting hit by the bus. And I loved it because Karen changed the ending to her book because of Harold coming to her and accepting the ending she had written. And I loved her line. I didn't capture it, but I loved her line of, what did she say? Something about like the person who's meant to die, who's supposed to, is willing to. I couldn't do it to him. Like we need to let that person live.
Yeah, I couldn't kill a person like that.
It's so heart-wrenching and heartwarming at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Because it is Karen understanding that she doesn't have to always write the same type of thing. She doesn't have to kill her protagonist in every book. But it took her meeting her protagonist who is willing to die to serve the story for her to understand that she doesn't need to. And then the way that it goes down, and the scene with the doctor where here's Harold in that hospital bed.
The doctor was such a dick.
He had that doctor had
him.
the worst bedside manner I've ever seen.
Bedside manner. God,
But I did like this.
A shard of metal from your watch obstructed the artery, keeping the blood loss low enough to keep you alive. Which is pretty cool.
It's pretty cool.
And you're going to have to keep that shard of watch there forever now.
Yeah.
Because apparently...
But also, I mean, cool story, bro. Like,
right.
I mean, hey, you want to see this part of my cool watch that's in my skin forever?
Yeah. But it made for a wonderful, heartwarming ending, right? Because the way that the story would have ended would have been poetic, very poetic. Because a man whose life had very little going on and very little meaning to it in a grand scheme does a selfless act of saving this boy, right? And pays the ultimate price for it. Very poetic. But the heartwarming side of it is, along the way, because he started hearing the narration and Harold changes his life. He's no longer solitary. He starts learning to play guitar. He meets a woman and falls in love. He gets that connection with relationship with her and the relationship with Dave, like his friend from work. He actually spends time with and cares about, what's going on with him.
Yeah, because he has to go live in his pod house because because his apartment got broken into by a cat machine.
Yeah. But Harold's life gets forever altered, and then he doesn't die, which means he gets to now live this life with Anna, who is also not going to have, because her life would have been irreparably changed as well. And there's a whole, you could write a whole story just based on like what could have happened to her, but it doesn't. And it's got this warm, fuzzy, happy ending that I really liked.
Yeah. In the ending to me was very Love Actually, which is funny because she's in it.
Yeah, that's true.
But it's very going through like some B-roll and talking about the sanctity of life, basically.
Yeah.
But again, it's not overhanded. Like, I mean, aside from that, it's not overhanded. It's not too saccharine. Now the way the original ending was straight out of like a 1950s thing, which for the story, for the original story, like what you were saying, totally works, because it's like, here's this guy, he has this boring life, and yet he has this textbook hero moment where he saves a little boy from being hit by a bus. Like, how much better can you get from that?
Yeah.
But so even the heavy-handed isn't heavy-handed in this movie. It's really and and the fact that that's where it ends, it's so it's so I don't know if this analogy will work for anybody else, but when I was in high school band, I remember this lesson from our band director telling us the difference between when you're at the end of a song and you play the last note, like in a hall in a concert. Don't stop the last note with your tongue.
Mhm.
Stop it by just stopping your breath, and it'll continue to ring out. And I feel like that's kind of what they did. They didn't just say, again, they didn't just say, okay, here's an ending. Let's put this together. And that's the ending. It just, there was a natural kind of wispiness where it all just kind of came together and went away.
There's the right.
Which stands in contrast to the new ending, because that is obviously very pasted together,
Mhm.
because she wrote herself into a corner where she realized she was making a bad decision
Yeah.
for the person involved.
Yeah, and and what it ends up giving us is the right amount of story to care without having to spoon feed us everything, and there's ambiguity in there because we don't know what's going to happen with Harold and Anna. I mean, they're very different people, but Harold is becoming different. So we don't know how that's all going to
Mhm.
play out, and it doesn't matter. We don't know what's going to happen with Karen in her career, and it doesn't really matter. We don't know anything about like how this worked, how he was able to hear her narration, why that's like we don't get some sort of,
We don't
thing
know
where it's a
book
magic
sales.
typewriter.
Yeah.
Does the
Right.
book do well? We don't, none of it matters. It's all
Yeah.
within this little story. This is a wonderful, fun little movie that I do feel like more people need to see. And I do feel like it is a very important movie to see in today's climate because it, as you said earlier, small things make a difference. That's something that I talk about a lot with people just in my day-to-day life is the acts of kindness towards someone else. Because being kind is doing something for someone else. Okay, being nice, people always talk about, oh, be nice. No, being nice is something you do for yourself to make you
Everyone
feel
being
better.
nice.
But
Yeah.
being kind, you're doing for the other person. And a small
Yeah.
kindness makes a huge
Yeah.
difference in someone's life. And in this case,
Yeah.
the small kindness of Will Ferrell's character of Harold doing a kindness to the author by saying, yes, this is the correct ending for your book, regardless of how that's going to ultimately affect me. This is what needs to happen for this story to be told.
Right.
And that kindness changes something in her, affects her to a point where she alters it to then show that same kindness back to him and be like, that this is a person we want in the world. Someone who's willing to do that, understanding everything that's going on. That's who you want to have them alive. And so there, and as I said earlier, there's a lot of like layers and philosophical discussions that could be had based on this as well. So yeah, this was a lot of fun. This is a really good choice, Jonathan. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad you enjoyed it. When we finished our last one, which was the Nick Cage spectacular. What was it? Wizards of Waverly Place. Sorcerer's Apprentice.
Sorcerer's Apprentice. Yeah.
God, yeah, Sorcerer's Apprentice. Um, I was like, okay, so it's my turn next. So we'll either do some other movie that I can't think of right now, or Stranger Than Fiction. And you said, okay, come hit me back around the winter, and we'll figure something out. And I hit you up around Thanksgiving, and I said, hey, look, the way the world seems like it might be around tax season. I said this movie is about a tax guy. Let's do it around tax season. But also, I think this is something that it's just going to feel like a little warm hug by the time we get to it. And that's exactly what it was. What it was for me. I'm glad it was for you too.
Absolutely.
And I hope that anybody who watches it has felt a little a little warmed by it,
Yeah.
and can take that message of you don't know what you don't know what lives your life touches. And like, you could go home. I heard somebody say one time, you can go home and kick the dog or you can pet it. And like, that'll dictate the rest of the evening in your house,
Mm-hmm.
is, just how the others around you are acting in response to that. And I think that's a pretty good illustration of the thing writ large, which again, we're right in the butthole of right now.
Yeah.
Um,
But by the way, if
and
the choice is
so
to kick the dog or pet the dog, always pet the dog.
always pet the dog.
Always pet the dog.
What the hell, people? Always pet the dog.
Always.
What's wrong with you?
I don't trust somebody who
Anyway,
kicks a dog.
one good line that I meant to touch on is, well, two. Hoffman, Hilbert, whatever, is telling Harold about what's coming and how he has to die. And Harold's response is, I can't die right now. It's really bad timing. And it's so dry and so perilous. He just sells it so well.
Mm-hmm.
But and then there's a little bit of an exchange, and Hilbert says, "Well, hold on, where is it?" He said, "Even if you avoid this death, another will find you."
That's true.
And
I mean,
like, right. And I just that I don't know. It has a little bit. To your thing, there are so many layers to this, and that just adds more to like the existentialist
yeah.
vibe of it. And it stood out with almost all of his lines are so Hoffman's lines are so funny and just so clipped, and he's just
Mm-hmm.
Dustin Hoffman like bananas. It reminded me. I mean, he's playing a teacher, but he reminded me in his very professorial delivery. Reminded me of when he was on The Simpsons playing a substitute teacher.
Yeah.
And very very much that deep rooted. He's always walking around like this, thinking and talking out of his chest like this. But he's just dropping just like little bomb after little bomb of little giggle lines, and then he lands on that one, and it's one of the last things that they say in exchange on the issue, and it's like, damn.
Yeah. No, this movie.
That's where we're bringing it. Okay.
I mean, huge amount of props to Zach Helm for writing a script this well done.
For his first time out, holy crap.
Yep. And Mark Forster just knowing the tone to go for, and everybody playing it exactly the way that it needed to be done. This is great. It was a really, really good movie that I think people should definitely check out. So if you can find it, watch Stranger Than Fiction. Highly recommended. I'm really glad I finally watched it. This is one that just never got around to, didn't really know anything about, and I was so surprised by how much I liked it, and just the feelings that it gave me were great. So thank you for the suggestion, getting me to watch it, and for coming on to talk about it.
That means a lot. Yeah. Thanks for having me again.
What have you got going on that you want to let people know about?
Let's see. I make chainmail things. You've probably heard me rattling this throughout this. This is a little pendant, or it can be a little fidget spinner. It looks like dragon scales. I have some other stuff around here. Here's a thing I just finished the other day. It doesn't have a clasp on it, but that looks cool. I have all kinds of stuff. You can. I have a store that has some things on it at extralettuce.com. You can go check that out, or hit me up on the socials at extralettuce. And about the thing about how the world's on fire. Like just be who you are. And I hope that the stuff I make is very centered around color and motif and all of that. And my aim is to just give you a little way where in this world where all of the big ways for us to express ourselves are kind of being tamped down, kind of. It's nice to have those little ways to add to your own world, to bring about kindness to yourself, to the person that you don't feel like right now, or the person you want to be, however you want to frame it. And I want to be here to make that possible. I make it possible for myself, and especially right now, it's nice to look down and see my little Hawkeye bracelet and say, oh, what was that cool thing that Hawkeye said? What was it? Okay, this looks bad. Okay, bad example, but you get my point. Yep. It's nice to wear something, not just to share yourself to the world, but to remind yourself of who you are and where you are, and just what's inside and what needs to be brought out. So extralettuce.com, and there are a few things up there. I'm kind of reinvigorating my store. It's the wrong word, but if you see something on there you like, I get it. If you see something that isn't on there, is something you think about, something you might want, I'm all into custom orders, so hit me up.
Excellent. Extralettuce.com. Check that out. It's wonderful stuff. Absolutely. Now, I do this show weekly, every Sunday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, twitch.tv/tvstravis or youtube.com/tvstravis. You can check it out live, and then it comes out as a podcast on your Wednesdays, all your podcatchers, including YouTube, as video form. So definitely, if you want to be part of the conversation, you can come into the live. You can check out the shows as they come out as podcasts. There is also my website, tvstravis.com. You can go there. You can find links to the shows, other shows that I do, projects that I'm working on, as well as links to merchandise. There's a Patreon there. The Patreon helps me to do things like my upcoming episode live in Las Vegas at the end of April. That's going to be a lot of fun at TMS Vegas, or also Dragon Con. I'll be back there this year. So things like that are made possible because of my wonderful patrons. So if that is something you can do, patreon.com/WYHS, and you can become a patron, which also gets you access to special first watch diaries that I'm doing, where I'm watching series and talking about watching them for the first time. Right now I'm in the middle of Ahsoka. Hadn't watched it yet so far. Well, if you want to know, you gotta become a patron. But I do like the show. Also,
we should do a show about Pretender.
That might happen sometime. We'll see. Also, if you want to leave some feedback, you can always email the show, podcast.wYHS@gmail.com. You can send an email there. You can find me, TV Stravis, on all the socials. I'm most active on probably Blue Sky, but I am on Instagram and Threads as well. Or you can go to voicecast.app/WYHS and leave a voice message for the show. And I will get those. And if you do leave one, you might even hear it on a future episode. So if you've got thoughts, if there's a particular movie that maybe you have thought on, or something you want to add to the conversation, send me the message, send me the email, whatever it is. I'd love to hear from you. So next week, we're going in a very different direction with our movie. I will have, from the Opinionated Lushes podcast, Jess, aka Variety Jess, is going to come on, and we are going to talk about the 2023 film Talk to Me. I can't wait, because I saw this in theaters and I loved the hell out of it. So it's a horror movie. It's a creepy one, but it was quite fun. And I know that Jess is into horror movies, and I can't wait to hear her thoughts on this one, because she hadn't seen it yet. So that is coming up next week, is Talk to Me. Can't wait for that. That'll be 1 week from today. Until then, Jonathan, thank you so much for being here. This was a blast. We'll do it again sometime. And just remember to enjoy your movies. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to some other people. Let's be excellent to each other.
Mr. Crick,
Yes, what is it?
you're staring at my tits.
That was the best part, is his reaction to it. Like, oh God, what am I
I
doing?
was like, oh God. He's like, God damn it, Harold. Why are you doing this?